Take charge of your leadership development. Join our How to Take the Lead Substack community for bonus materials, exclusive content, and discussions that will challenge and change the way you lead. Visit howtotakethelead.com to find out more.
Absolutely loving clarity to confusion. That, yeah, you've nailed it. That is definitely
not
your
clarity,
superpower.
not clarity to that would be like my anti-superpower. You're listening to How to Take the Lead with Lee Griffith
And Carrie-Anne Wade.
Two corporate colleagues turned business besties who question everything we've ever learned about leadership.
What started with us putting the world to rights over a gin after work is now a weekly show challenging the myths and perceptions and exploring what leadership looks like in the modern day.
We'll also be sharing our experiences and stories along the way.
You can find our show notes at howtotakethelead.com.
Hit subscribe to receive new episodes every Thursday.
Plus, we'd love for you to rate or leave a review of the show.
And please share your thoughts and stories on the topics we cover using the hashtag HowToTakeTheLead. Hello and welcome to episode 1 of How to Take the Lead, the podcast. Can you even believe it? A year ago, we were setting up for our first Instagram live, and absolutely cacking our pants. And now we're like, oh yeah, go us. We're just going to do a podcast.
I know. Here we are with 5 series of lives under our belts, and we're like, yeah, we could turn this into a podcast. No props.
Yes,
so here we are.
So we are delighted to have you join us today, and we have a great first episode planned. Now, this episode was inspired by something I saw on TV recently. So you know I love my detective shows, don't you?
I know, yes. Anybody who has ever come across you must know that you love your detective shows.
And no, it wasn't an episode of Murder, She Wrote, although I'm sure there'll be Jessica Fletcher inspiration at some point in this series. But it was a show called The Rookie. Have you seen it?
I haven't. No. I've only got your say so that it's worth a watch, Lee.
Well, I'm not going that far, but it's a American cop detective show, trainee cops. Anyway, one of the episodes, one of the rookie cops was trying to figure out what his superpower would be. He was able to recognise all the things that his colleagues were really great at, but couldn't really pinpoint his thing. And the show, as it was, goes through different scenarios of which he's trying to fit, is this what my superpower is? Is this what my superpower is? By the end of it, he obviously had figured out what his superpower was. And for him, it was empathy, because he'd served some time wrongly, I say, in prison. And so he could recognise in other people who were scared about going to jail or being arrested. So that was his superpower. You don't need to watch the episode now. I've basically just told it to you.
So we should have done a spoiler alert on that one. If anybody wanted to watch it, spoiler alert.
But anyway, it got me thinking about superpowers in leadership. My trailer for, if you bear with me, was that often we talk about the fact that as a leader, particularly if you're a senior one, you've got to be across everything, but that doesn't mean you have to be great at everything. And we know that there's a lot of strength in knowing where you excel, in the same way as knowing where you're not so great, so that you can make sure you've got the right teams around you. But I don't think I ever really thought about my superpowers until I left my corporate role and was trying to figure out life and where I fitted in the world, and what I wanted to do next. And this episode really got me thinking about that and how much awareness do leaders bring to what is their superpowers. So, Carrie-Anne, is this something that was this an epiphany moment for you as well? Or
do you know what? Yeah, when we started having this conversation about leadership superpowers, I was like, they are actually a thing, but I don't think I've ever really considered them as superpowers before. So it got me thinking they're definitely real, but I'm not sure how I thought about them before superpowers came into my vocabulary about it. So I guess really for me, when I started to reflect on it, I started to think about things that as not necessarily just as leaders, but as individuals, as people, that we are naturally and innately good at, things that just come naturally to us to be within our gift to do really well. They might be skills, they might be certain behaviours, they're possibly very unique to you because they're based on your skills and experiences. But I don't think until very recently I'd ever considered talking about them as superpowers. But now that we have started to have that conversation, I am all over the leadership superpowers. And I'm like, yes,
you're
please.
Going to buy your cape.
Yes, I want a cape. I will probably wear my pants over my trousers again. I have been known to do that. So
you have, yes.
Yeah. So I'm loving the leadership superpowers conversation now, definitely.
So obviously I need to know what your superpower is. I mean, I think I know what it is from what I've seen from you over the years, but how would you describe your superpower?
Oh my God, this is such a hard question because I'm one of those people, I find it really cringy having to talk about myself. So it's a bit like, so I was trying to think about how I would sum this up, and I'm not quite sure, even as a communicator, that I've got the words right, but I definitely feel like my superpower is around enabling people to be able to contribute and come into a conversation, into a topic, helping to facilitate them having a voice and facilitating getting an outcome, and doing that, I think, and diplomatically. So for me, I feel like there's something for me about facilitation and collaboration and bringing people together to get hopefully a positive outcome and reach a good solution on something.
Fabulous. With my coaching hat on, I'd be saying you've got great self-awareness, because that's totally how I would be nailing what your superpower was as well. So that's good.
I'm going to just make a little note of that for myself. And I'm sure we'll get on to asking for feedback from others at some point in this conversation. So thank you very much, Lee. Much appreciated.
You are welcome. You are welcome. So a bit of a philosophical question.
Hang on, whoa. What's your superpower? You can't make me say mine and feel really awkward and cringy about it and then not tell me what yours is.
Do you know, I thought, is she going to ask me or not? But then I thought, it's a bit egotistical if I go, hang on, let me just tell you what my superpower is. Thank you very much.
I love it.
So my superpower, I think... interesting, would love to get your reflections on it, but my superpower, I think, is around being able to get clarity from confusion. So I love organizing stuff, love a Trello board, but it can also be, I love helping people sift through, sort out, filter their thoughts and their information and ideas and all those things that might conflict, and try and streamline it into something that's really simple and easy to understand and help them to communicate it. So that strategy and planning type stuff, but taking that confusion and bringing it into something really simple, I think is what I love to do.
You love to do it, but also you are excellent at it. I nearly dropped a swear word then as well. I was going to say you're bloody excellent at it. Absolutely loving clarity to confusion. That, you've nailed it. That is definitely
not clarity to confusion. That would be like my anti-superpower.
Confusion to clarity. See, this is why I need a Lee in my life, because I need that superpower.
Yeah, I'm not going to be paying you to do my marketing anytime soon.
Confusion to clarity. Get it right. Confusion to clarity. I think you've nailed it. But I think that you have other superpowers, but that's definitely one of your total supercharged boost superpower.
Right, can I move on now?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, please move on quickly.
So my philosophical question, I don't actually know if it's a philosophical question. I might have to ask my husband this, but is a superpower something you either have or you don't have? Or is it something that you develop your powers in over time? Are we like saying for it to be a real superpower, then it's got to be really innate in you?
So my personal view on this, because it was a bit of a nature versus nurture type scenario, I think there are things that you are naturally brilliant at, that you are very gifted in and that are innate. And I think they are definitely 100% your superpowers. Now, I don't think that's to say that you can't nurture those even further with practice, learning. And it doesn't mean that you can't learn over time, I don't think, to get better at those things that you're innately good at. But for me, I do think if it's a genuine superpower, it's something that just feels like it comes very naturally to you. You might not even know that you do it really well, but that it's there and you do it. Obviously, as a leader or as a human being, there are other skills and things that we can learn to help complement those superpowers. But for me, it feels like it's definitely very much more of a nature thing. I don't know about you though, Lee. You've got a look on your face that says you might disagree, which might be the first time ever in Take the Lead.
I don't disagree per se, but I do think that there is probably a bit more of nurture in my viewpoint than perhaps you. I kind of think your superpower is a bit like your muscles, and you need to exercise them a bit. You know, I've got a six-pack somewhere hiding under this top, but I need to work out to kind of really get it popping, work out a lot to get it popping.
No, is that my cue to go, no you don't, Lee, you look fabulous?
So I think, you know, yes, people are going to be naturally skilled in certain areas, but I do think that there are perhaps some people who don't know that they've got skill in that area until they've had time to practice and learn about it a bit more. And that's where I think the nurtured side comes in a bit.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, actually, Lee. I think that's about people not, like, it hasn't been identified. They haven't identified for themselves yet what their superpower is, and that they maybe need somebody to say, you are really good at this, like you should do this more, or you should practice it more, or understand a bit more about kind of the impacts that you have when you operate in this way. So yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that point. And I think sometimes it takes another person to maybe say to you, you're in this situation, you're really good at doing this. I think that's like a brilliant thing that you can do, which might actually for you just be part of how you operate on a day-to-day basis. You might not perceive that as a superpower, but other people might. So I definitely think there is something about identifying what they are and how you can get better at them and how you can utilize them more in your leadership journey, I guess.
So there's definitely something for me about when I look at leaders that I've worked with who have perhaps had a limiting self-belief or negative self-talk about they just can't do something. So, you know, I don't like presenting, I'm not great at presenting. Then you work with them, you develop them, they get more practice at it, they realise it's not as scary as they thought, they start getting good feedback, it boosts their confidence, and then suddenly they're in lecture theatres giving presentations and they're not even thinking about it, and they're really connecting with people. So I do think there is a journey that is not necessarily always just feedback. Some of it's your own internal work you have to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of what we're about when we talk through how to take the lead, isn't it? About how you go on that journey and how you identify some of those areas that you might need to work on. So I don't necessarily think that you are born with your superhero cape on and day one, like, you know what it is and you're going to be brilliant at it. But I think over time you start to identify those things that you are really good at and that you want to spend more time practicing, getting better at, enacting in your daily life, in your leadership life. I also think there's something for me around, I've talked about identifying what yours are in terms of superpowers, but I think there's also something about knowing where maybe you don't have those superpowers, and that's okay too. And actually, as a leader, I think don't be afraid to build your team around bringing in other superpowers that you don't have. I think that's absolutely okay to do that, and it's a really important part of being a leader and kind of knowing actually what you're maybe not so good at, and that you need to bring some of that into your team to help you lead effectively. At Cat's Pyjamas, we empower brilliant communications professionals to grow and thrive in their careers through mentoring, collaboration and community. If you'd like to find out more or subscribe to our newsletter, you can visit www.cats-pyjamas.co.uk, where you can even book your free 30-minute discovery call. I'm so passionate about helping comms pros to grow and thrive, and I'm really looking forward to working with you.
Hi there, if you're enjoying this episode of How to Take the Lead, please hit subscribe and go leave a review or a rating. We'd also love to hear your stories and thoughts on today's topic. Please DM us, our links are in the show notes, or tag us into your socials using the hashtag How to Take the Lead. You know I love a Google, so I Googled leadership superpowers and a whole load of articles popped up, and they were talking about the secret or hidden skills that leaders have. And what surprised me, and it's something that we talk about all the time, things like empathy, listening, communication, these, so-called soft skills, and I say in... with my little bunny ears because I hate that word, but these are the same things that people either belittle or don't think are as important when they're recruiting people or developing people. I just thought it was really interesting that actually for many they're seen as superpowers, yet in the day-to-day working people don't appreciate them.
Yeah, well, we've talked about this in many other episodes of How to Take the Lead when we were doing our lives, I know. And I think there is something about, in this day and age, needing to just think differently about what we're recruiting for from a leadership perspective. And I think, it isn't necessarily always about being a technical expert in a field. It's actually much broader than that in terms of kind of what you're bringing to the table as a leader. And we talk a lot about being about connection, building relationships, and actually you need to have all of those superpowers. Some of them might be your superpowers, some might just be powers, because maybe, like you say, you do have to nurture them a bit more, understand how you can kind of enact those powers a bit more. But definitely for me, I mean, it aggravates me when people call them soft skills, because I think they're actually just skills you should expect every leader to have. But being able to be empathetic, for example, is really important. But I guess it goes back to that nature versus nurture point, because some people are naturally more empathetic than other people. So it's kind of, how do you test for some of those things when you're looking at building your leadership team?
Yeah. And test, do they have it versus could they get it, which is a really interesting one, which I'm sure is a whole other topic that we could pick up in another episode. If you're, someone's listening to this now and questioning what their superpowers are, a bit like, the guy in The Rookie at the beginning of the show, how do you even go about starting to identify what your superpowers are?
So I think for me, in terms of that sort of how-to question, take some time to work out what your superpowers might be. Think about what you're good at, what you feel you're good at, where you feel most confident that you're having an impact, in the workplace as a leader. And don't be afraid to ask other people for some feedback around it. Like, ask other people, because they might recognize things in you, as we've said previously, that you might not highlight yourself as a superpower, and you might not realize how important that is for your team, for your organization, for you to be kind of acting in that way. So that would definitely be one of my tips. And I think on the point of impact as well, understand, once you've got a sense of what you're bringing to the table as a leader, what you perceive and others perceive to be your superpowers, and you might have more than one, which would be brilliant. I also think it's really important to reflect on where they can have the biggest positive impact, so that you are a bit more considerate about where you might be using those superpowers and putting them into action, because you want them to have a positive impact. So are you really clear where you can have that impact in your organisation or your team?
I completely agree about the sense checking with other people. And when I was setting up the business or thinking about what I wanted to do next, I actually drew out a Venn diagram of what people told me of this. Sorry, this is the super organizer filter and sorter coming out in me. So I drew out what people told me I was great at, what I thought I was good at, and then what I loved doing, because I do think there's a difference between what you enjoy and what you excel at. I've been told that I've been really good at stuff that I've absolutely hated and found really unfulfilling. So it was important for me that I had those three dynamics. And then from that, I was able to identify the 2 or 3 things that were cropping up, in common across the 3 areas. And they made me feel really excited and thought, actually, I can make a business just out of focusing on that. So I thought that was a really helpful exercise. People can't see me, but I am doing
waving your hands around, making a Venn diagram with your hands. Excellent. I would just say, sorry, I'm just going to pick up on a little point I noticed there, Lee, when you said it was what other people thought you were great at, but what you thought you were good at. Come on, pick yourself up a bit more. This is about our superpowers. It's got to be what you think you're great at as well.
Yes. If I knew anything about superhero films, I'd probably throw in some analogy here about, I don't know, Spider-Man losing his powers or something, but I don't. So I'm just going to say
Kryptonite and Superman. There's something there as well, but I don't know enough about it.
Is it possible to lose your superpowers?
I don't think maybe you ever completely lose them, but I think there is something around how motivated you are to use them. So I think motivation can play a big part in how much you choose to use your superpowers or not. And I think a lack of motivation means that you might find it much harder to tap into your natural superpowers, or complete lack of motivation might mean that you're like, no, I've disengaged with this. It's not for me. So for me, I think there is a bit of a connection between motivation and your leadership superpowers.
Yeah, I always say, certainly with people I work with, that any strength that you have, if you overplay it, can become a weakness. And I do think that would be the same for your superpowers. So, you know, a great leader is someone who is really adaptable, who works on their skills and recognises when they need to take a different approach. And it's really important that you don't become complacent and overplay that one trick that's yours. You know, I know
you don't want to be the one trick pony.
No, I know that I love finding order in things, for example, but I also know of myself that if I do that too much, I can become really indecisive. I can feel quite overwhelmed with too much information. So my strength becomes my greatest weakness, but it's something I'm aware of. It's something I work on. And I say that the same to leaders that I work with. You know, how can you make sure, for example, your attention to detail doesn't become micromanaging other people? So it's a really fine balance sometimes.
And I think really important to have that awareness of what you've just said and kind of test it out a little bit. Like, so if you're going to spend the time considering and thinking about what your superpowers might be, spend the same amount of time thinking about, as we were saying, about that impact. Like, if I do this too much, what's the impact going to be? What's the potential negative impact? So yeah, I think that's actually a really good tip, and something I'm thinking that I might need to do for myself.
Well, it is something that we don't, because we all like to be in our comfort zones as well. So it can be so easy for us to just fall into the thing that we like to do. But it can put you into a quite destructive cycle if you are someone that just completely goes OTT with it.
I also think one of the other things around superpowers is sometimes once other people know what yours are, they want to utilise them a lot. And sometimes that can feel quite constricting in the workplace. So like, if your organisation, your leadership team, whomever, know that you're really good at something, you sort of become the go-to person for that thing all of the time. And sometimes you can feel like, actually, I want to stretch myself outside of this, and we need some other people to be able to help lead some of this and be good at it as well. Otherwise, I think that can feel like quite a difficult scenario to be in.
So what would your advice be if someone is in that situation where they're going, you know, oh, hang on a minute, this is the 5th time this month I've been told to do this project of this type, for example. Why can't someone else pick up the slack?
I think you have to be able to have that conversation, and, you know, there are lots of ways around that conversation. Some of it might be about, actually, I don't feel like I'm getting any learning opportunities because you're always expecting me to lead the same thing, and actually I need that opportunity to grow. That might be one part of the conversation you need to have. Some of it might be about your capacity, as in, often what can happen is you get given extra things because they're of that type, because people know your superpower is going to make it happen. And I think sometimes you have to have that conversation about, I don't have the capacity to take that on because I've got all of this other workload that I need to be responsible for. So I think there's different ways around having the conversation depending on the impact that it's having. But I think definitely you have to have that open conversation. Otherwise you risk becoming a bit resentful that you're not getting those other opportunities to use your superpowers in different ways.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point for leaders in general to be aware of when they're looking at perhaps their teams and how they're dividing tasks or giving opportunities to people. You know, if you think about a chief executive who might be looking at their executive team going, right, well, I know so-and-so is really great at doing the staff-facing stuff, so I'm going to just keep pushing it to them all the time. But then they're actually causing an issue where you've not got great visibility by your other executive members internally, for example. So as a leader, it's not necessarily just about you looking at your own skills, but looking at the broader skill sets of your team and their superpowers and not letting them be overused as well. I think it's a really good point.
Definitely. Oh, we're building like the superhero team. I love it.
Yeah. So to wrap up, every episode we're going to bring you the how-to. So this is the bit you can skip right to the end of the episode for if you just want the headlines of what we've been talking about or some really practical takeaways. Although, of course, we do hope that you stay and listen to the whole thing. So in today's how-to, we're going to focus on how to harness your superpower. Obviously. Carrie Ann, what would be your kind of key tips or takeaways?
My key tips would be take the time to work out what it is if you don't already know. And if you're anything like me, you probably find it quite cringy thinking about it. So you might need to make that time to work that out. Ask for feedback to help you with some of that, because one of your superpowers might be something you don't consider to be one. And then my third kind of top tip or takeaway would be to really take that time to understand where your superpowers can have the biggest positive impact, to make sure you're focusing them and your energy in the right place.
Perfect.
I love yours now, Lee. I want yours now.
Well, mine, you've stolen two of them. So the whole mapping what you love and what people say you're great at, I think if you do that as an exercise, then you'll start to realise where your superpowers lie. And then I would just end with remember, if you overuse your superpower, it can become a weakness.
That is honestly, I'm glad I didn't steal yours, because that was your top tip. But that is the top tip of the episode. I think that's what I'm going to go away and reflect on.
Excellent. Well, that's it. End of episode 1. We've done it.
Look forward to seeing you, hearing you, talking to you for episode 2.
Well, I can see you, but no one else can. Bye.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode.
Don't forget to hit subscribe so you're the first to receive new episodes when they drop every Thursday.
If you enjoyed the show, we'd love it if you would rate it or leave a review.
And let us know your thoughts and own experiences.
Get in touch with either of us on LinkedIn, Twitter or Instagram.
Or use the hashtag #HowToTakeTheLead.
Until next week, get out there and take the lead.